In Egypt's Dark Age, warlords like Antifi had replaced the real kings of Egypt.
And Antifi's delusions of grandeur, so vividly expressed inside his tomb, are even more emphasised on the outside because he chose burial inside a rock shaped like a natural pyramid. He wanted to be the local pharaoh.
And in a way, he was, because whoever fed and protected the people also led the people. But as the power of warlords like Antifi grew, so did the conflicts between them. And over time, as they either defeated their neighbours or formed alliances with them, two separate dynasties of warlord kings emerged. One in the north at Heracleopolis, where they wore the red crown of Lower Egypt, and one in the south at Thebes, symbolised by the white crown of Upper Egypt. Egypt was a divided kingdom of two lands, and between them lay a war zone. Situated at its centre lay Egypt's most sacred site, its earliest royal burial ground, and still today an evocative and atmospheric place. This was the resting place of Egypt's first kings, whose mummified bodies were buried in elaborate burial chambers beneath the desert floor. A safe place for their souls, or so they thought. But hostilities between the two warring factions were about to plumb new depths of horror, with an assault so blasphemous it would change the face of Egypt forever.
One of the most violent acts was recorded in later texts as the vile deed, for the northern warlord kings, fighting their southern opponents here, actually desecrated these royal tombs.
For their troops set fire to the tombs and destroyed the royal mummies. At a stroke, Egypt's physical link to its ancient past was severed.
Such an act of desecration was completely unimaginable, and the Egyptian people were rightly appalled.
Although the northern kings deeply regretted what their troops had done, the destruction was irreversible, and the origins of Egypt's royal past lost forever. Of course, the problem with such times of destruction is that there's very little left of them for us Egyptologists to find. But clues do remain if you know what you're looking for. Today, what's left of the violation of this royal burial ground is surprising. Thousands upon thousands of broken pots. Although most are not part of the destruction itself, they represent centuries of atonement for the loss of Egypt's physical connection with its past. Now, not long after the desecration, this became a place of pilgrimage where people came with little pots like this one, filled with food, drink, incense, which they offered up to the souls of the dead kings once buried here. It was believed that at death these souls of the kings had joined with the soul of Osiris, god of the dead. And as this place became a site of pilgrimage, it's as if the people of Egypt were trying to make amends for the desecration of the past. Egypt's spiritual connection to its royal ancestors was all it had left after the northern warlords had destroyed their physical remains. And the desecration soon provoked violent retaliation. Directly across the desert from Abydos lay Thebes, the stronghold of the southern warlords. And they would soon rise up against their northern rivals and attempt to resurrect Egypt as a united land.
Back in 2000 BC, Thebes was a one-donkey town, and yet its warlords had two distinct advantages over other leaders. They lived on a bend in the Nile called a Kenna Bend, a strategic control point of rich farmland. And their local god was Montu, the god of war.
The warlords of Thebes would reunite Egypt, and one in particular came to the fore. His images were carved into the walls of his Theban tomb complex, and his name tells us much.
This is the Theban warlord, Montuhotep. And there's a real clue as to what was happening at this part of Egyptian history, because his name, Montuhotep, means the local war god Montu is content, because Hotep simply means content and happy. So, if the war god was happy with Montuhotep, this means that he was a very powerful military figure. And this is a wonderful scene. There are a lot of little clues here to tell us what's going on. And if you look really closely, you can see hands embracing him, flanking him at his back, at his front, around his middle. He's been embraced by the gods, chief amongst whom is Montu himself. And there he is. He's nose to nose with the king. He's giving him the breath of life and infusing him with his own divine power.
It was the power of victory, one that finally brought an end to Egypt's first dark age.
Montuhotep really did live up to his name as a true son of the war god, because he took his armies north, he conquered the north, and he reunited Egypt. But best of all, he's got the red crown on. And this is the red crown of the north, because Montuhotep is declaring to the world, I might be a southerner, I might be from Thebes, I should be wearing the white crown, but look at me now, I have the red crown. I am the king of the north and the king of the south, and I have reunited Egypt.
As Egypt's new king, he became Montuhotep II. But his victory came at a high price. The grim details of what his soldiers went through can be found on Thebes' west bank at Deir el-Bahri. It was inside one of the tombs here that the remains of Montuhotep's warriors were uncovered in 1923. Their bodies silent witnesses to Egypt's civil war of 4,000 years ago, which careful analysis revealed in fascinating detail.
Now, the archaeologists found around 60 bodies in the tomb, and these are the original excavation photographs. All of them had been naturally preserved, naturally mummified in the hot, dry climate, so you've still got the skin and the hair.
And crucially, evidence of how these men had fought and died.
Some of these bodies had been pierced by arrows. This one goes right into the left side of the chest. Others had actually been buried with these leather wrist guards that archers use.
10 of the warriors had been killed with ebony-tipped arrows. But in others, the wounds are even more brutal.
You can see here somebody's hit this man on the head with a real whack, and you can see this very, very graphic area of damage there. And after these series of furious blows had been rained down on these poor guys, they lay helpless on the field of battle, their bodies picked at by vultures. You can see here the dreadful damage. It's such a profound image.
The bodies reveal evidence of the weapons used against them as they fought for control of Egypt. Arrows, slingshot, and even rocks had been hurled at the warriors from above. Eventually, their bodies were collected from the battlefield and carefully wrapped in linen. This linen bore the insignia of the Theban tomb complex, belonging to their leader Montuhotep. But just as significant as the bodies themselves was where Montuhotep chose to bury his fallen heroes. Today, the warrior's resting place is a little-known sealed tomb. But 4,000 years ago, Montuhotep honoured his dead soldiers with a burial amongst the graves of his highest officials, making them part of his monument to victory. The new king had created what could well be the world's first known war cemetery.